Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show.
Hello and welcome back to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show with Olivia Vizachero. Olivia is a former attorney turned life and business coach for lawyers. She helps ambitious attorneys stop overthinking, set those boundaries, and take bold action so they can build a practice and the life they actually love. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about why lawyers avoid difficult conversations at work and what could end up costing them in the long run. Miss Olivia, my dear, welcome back.
Great to see you, Evan.
Good to see you too. So, Olivia, why do so many successful lawyers still struggle to have those uncomfortable conversations at work?
A huge issue that causes people to struggle with this is the story they tell themselves about their ability to have difficult conversations. So I watch this happen all the time. They continuously repeat this idea that they're not good at it, that they hate conflict, they don't like to have those conversations. And the more you reinforce that narrative with yourself, the more you're going to create all of this unnecessary dread. The conversation's uncomfortable as it is, but you're adding an extra layer of discomfort on top of it when you work yourself up ahead of time about how much you dislike it, about how uncomfortable it is for you, and that you really want to resist and avoid it. So that's a first thing that we need to change, is just telling yourself a different story. Even just taking the word difficult out of it, like, I can have conversations. We don't need to put an extra layer of judgment on it. So that's one. And then the other reason people struggle is because they haven't built the skill of being able to embrace discomfort. So they're what I call comfort entitled. They like feeling all comfy cozy, and don't get me wrong, who doesn't? But a lot of the things that we need to do in order to create the results we want to create require us to do what I call gag and go through that discomfort. So you want to figure out what negative emotions specifically come up for you when you're having a difficult conversation, and then identify those feelings and work on expanding your capacity to just like sit in them and not squirm your way out or avoid the conversation altogether in order to avoid the emotion.
But what kind of conversations do lawyers tend to put off the most, though, even when they know those conversations need to happen?
Oh, there's so many of them. With staff, negative feedback, addressing issues that will end up manifesting like a lot of resentment, a lot of frustration, but you won't actually have the conversation that needs to be had, that someone's missing the mark or they're not meeting expectations. You might not even be clear on what the expectation is that they're not meeting. You're just like, I don't know. This isn't what I wanted. I don't know exactly what I wanted, but it's not this. So they'll avoid those conversations because they don't want to hurt someone's feelings, even though they'll continue to hurt someone's feelings with how they act in a passive aggressive manner. So that's a big one. Telling clients bad news. They feel guilty, or they feel maybe frustrated with themselves or worried that the client's going to get upset and fire them. So they'll avoid those conversations. And man, one of the biggest topics of conversation that I watch attorneys avoid is conversations around bills. So let's say you quoted a range for what the legal fees for a matter would be, and it just required more work than you anticipated, because we tend to underestimate. And attorneys will know, like, oh, I'm going over the budget, and they're not going to be happy about that. And they'll avoid that conversation and they'll just do the work, and then they send the bill out. And then clients are very unhappy because they feel blindsided. And I tell people all the time, you think they don't want to hear the bad news. Most people crave certainty.
Yep.
And even if it's bad, they can handle it. But they feel so much safer and so much more secure when they just know on the front end rather than being surprised on the back end. So there's going to be discomfort both ways. I highly recommend having the conversation on the front end.
Right. So what are people usually telling themselves, though, that kind of makes avoiding that conversation feel easier than maybe just addressing it in a more direct manner?
I think a couple different things. One, they'll tell themselves like, oh, I'll do it later. And then later is always later. They just keep putting, I'll do it later tonight. I'll call them first thing in the morning. And it's just enough to kick the can down the road a little bit. And then that same excuse keeps working until a week's gone by, 2 weeks have gone by. And then you've got all this guilt about, ooh, I should have told them earlier. Now they're going to be mad that I didn't tell them. And then we avoid the guilt and we just keep prolonging it. So it's like a catch-22 that really creates some messy situations. That's one. They'll tell themselves that they can't do it. We love to tell ourselves that we can't. And when we think we can't, we don't.
Right.
But you actually can, or you'll say that it's hard. Maybe you won't say I can't, but it's going to be so hard. And physically saying the words is not hard. You have the vocabulary, you can get the sentences out of your mouth. You just have to feel uncomfortable. So I always think it's much more helpful to use the accurate description of what experience you'd have to be going into rather than telling yourself something that's not technically true, which is that you're unable to do it physically.
So how can putting off that one uncomfortable conversation start creating bigger problems, maybe inside the firm, maybe internally over time?
For sure. So just a culture of a lack of transparency, right? That really can become infectious. We put things off. We don't tell the full truth and nothing but the truth, so help you. And there's secrecy. You start to withhold things. You start to hide things. This can really get people in trouble as far as malpractice is concerned. I watch so many attorneys have a lot of anxiety and fear around getting grieved or committing malpractice. And most of them are people who try so hard and they give it everything they've got. And I tell them, typically, if you talk to an attorney that handles those types of cases, they handle attorney grievance issues or malpractice claims, they will tell you that people get in trouble when you hide stuff.
Yep.
Or you intentionally committed a wrong act versus I made a mistake. Now, if you make a mistake and then you try and cover it up and you hide it, that can get you in trouble, obviously. But pure intent and a mistake normally doesn't lead to anything that egregious. But if you get caught up in that, one lie begets the next lie, and I think it becomes a really slippery slope to withhold things. To offer another answer to an earlier question you asked me, you said, why do people do it? I think another reason is they tell themselves, this is like the perfectionist in them, that I can make up for it. There's something that I can do between now and then that can soften the blow, or maybe I can try this avenue and I might be able to, find a way out or find a better solution. And then if that doesn't come to fruition, now you've waited way longer and you still don't have any better news to report. So you're just compounding the problem when the easier thing and often the better thing for both you and the client would be to just rip the Band-Aid off and tell them the bad news.
So, Olivia, how does avoiding these conversations, start affecting the way other people around you behave or perform, in the firm?
I think you subtly teach them what is acceptable and what is not. You're slowly and subtly reinforcing that it's bad to communicate bad news. It's bad to communicate something that someone might have a negative emotion about. So if you're teaching other people that, especially younger attorneys, they're going to learn the same thing. Oh, I don't have that conversation. Oh, it's okay for me to put off calling the client and telling them. Oh, I can downplay that in an email rather than really explaining the impact of that. And over time, that leads to just poor representation and a poor relationship. People have to remember, when someone's hiring an attorney, no matter what it's typically for something that they can't handle themselves. They either don't have the license required to do it, or they don't have the skill set required to do it. So they have to put so much trust in another person. And it's up to you. Do you want to enforce that trust and build it up and make it stronger? Or do you want to erode it? And I understand the natural human tendency to want to avoid an uncomfortable conversation, but it really is up to you what experience your client's going to have with you. And again, you have to go back to reframing. If you think it's better to hold off and avoid the uncomfortable conversation, you will continue to do that. You will always proceed with doing what you think is best. So if you don't want to operate that way, you have to believe deeply that it is better to be transparent and forthcoming and have those difficult conversations as quickly as possible.
But why do lawyers sometimes wait until this problem becomes, escalates or becomes urgent before having that conversation they should have had at an earlier point?
Such a good question. It's all about discomfort avoidance. I like to tell my clients, avoidant people avoid. So that's all that's happening. We're operating from the same system. It's not like all of a sudden you just get this burst of either integrity or a desire to be transparent and you're feeling really motivated from a positive emotion to do that. Instead, early when you quote unquote should be having the conversation, the most immediate discomfort is the discomfort of having the conversation. All right. And then as time passes, the discomfort of not having it, like whatever the negative consequence would be, starts to outweigh that. So it's like the dial flips from one side to the other. And then the most immediate discomfort or the most extreme discomfort is from continuing to avoid having the conversation. So people finally have it, whether that's communicating bad news or you're at your wit's end and you just can't take the underperforming employee anymore. So you finally decide to gag and go and address whatever's not working. Normally that doesn't go super well. It's more conflict ridden than if you were to have it at an earlier date. But that's all that happens, is that the discomfort of having it gets outweighed by the discomfort of not having it. And then you avoid that discomfort by having the convo.
So what starts to happen personally when someone gets into the habit of avoiding those uncomfortable conversations over and over again? How does that kind of translate into their personal life as well?
Man, people do this both at work and in their personal lives. So if you do it at the office with your clients, with your coworkers, it's definitely going to be manifesting in your personal relationships as well. But you really don't realize how much negative weight you carry around with you when you're avoiding this stuff. We also tend to make it a bigger deal. So it's not like we're not thinking about it. It's not out of sight, out of mind. You're ruminating over it and vacillating over it in your head. And as you do that, you make the conversation scarier. You start to catastrophize. Well, what if this happens? What if they do this? What if the client fires me? What if I say this and the person quits? I can't handle a staffing shortage right now. What if they say that they won't approve the work and I think the work's really necessary in order to get the outcome that they want? So they just start spending all of this time thinking about it while they're also slowly but surely beating themselves up for not having the conversation. I really need to have that conversation. I should have talked to them already. And it's just like guilt, stress, anxiety, worry. And it just starts to weigh you down. Carrying that around with you, it's like, the hikers that put rocks in their backpacks or like the weighted vests. You go through every day like that. So it takes so much more energy just to get through your everyday stuff. And ultimately, this is what leads to people being really exhausted with their work. They're carrying around this unnecessary emotional weight.
So do you have an example, of a situation where having the conversation early would have, saved someone a lot of unnecessary stress later on?
For sure. So definitely with underperforming employees, my clients will come to me and they're very frustrated. They've probably been dealing with it for a while before they come and work with me. And they will just keep telling themselves like, this person should know better. And they might have what I call like a very surface level talking to, which is just go do better. And they're avoiding the more meaty conversation, which is let's figure out what's actually going on. What's causing this problem? How are you approaching your work? What do we need to change? Do you actually have the skills to make those changes? So after maybe months of struggling and suffering on their own, they come work with me and we start to figure out how they need to approach these conversations. It's been going on for so long, the underperformance, which has been going unaddressed and unresolved, that they're really at their wit's end. And the employee knows that they've been underperforming and not meeting expectations. So now they're in a state of like immense shame, immense inadequacy, and it's really hard for them to take positive, productive, corrective action when they're weighed down by all of their own negative emotions about how poorly they're doing at their job. And the situation becomes pretty unworkable. Normally, it doesn't get resolved. Most of the supervisors don't have the patience to go through what might be like a 6-month, year-long process of like rehabilitation and problem solving to help them get the skill set they need in order to meet expectations. And the person doesn't have the confidence in their ability to improve at this point. So normally that ends in someone leaving the firm and them starting the process over again with someone new.
Wow. So if someone knows they have a conversation that they've been avoiding, how can they push through that discomfort, and finally address it, Ms. Olivia?
The first thing is normalizing that negative emotions aren't bad. And man, if you hear that and you're like, what is she talking about? Really take a second and think about where you learned that. I mean, I tell my clients everything that I coach on, I've coached myself on, I've worked on myself. And I learned growing up that you're kind of supposed to just put a smile on and act like everything's okay. And talking about your negative emotions makes other people uncomfortable, and don't let people know that you're feeling negative emotions because they'll feel uncomfortable too. So we just have to change the way we think about them. They're not a bad thing. They're a part of the human experience. We get to control them by choosing the thoughts that we think, but sometimes we want to think negative thoughts about a particular set of facts. You might want to feel disappointed that the judge ruled against you, or you might want to feel annoyed that opposing counsel won't agree to this thing. All of that's okay. If we can make it okay for people to feel negative emotions and not feel like we need to save them from experiencing them, then we can feel a little bit more comfortable going in and allowing them to have an emotional reaction. The other really important thing here is owning what you're responsible for, but releasing what you're not responsible for. So we can't control how another person feels. Their thoughts cause their feelings. Our thoughts cause our feelings.
Exactly.
It's okay for them to feel a negative emotion, and it's not your responsibility to prevent that because you literally can't. So you have to be okay with them having whatever feeling they're going to feel and have the conversation anyways. If you stop taking responsibility for managing another person's emotional experience, it's much easier to just have the conversation you want to have.
That's good stuff, Miss Olivia. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Evan.
All right. That's it for today's episode of the Less Stressed Lawyer Show. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start making bold moves in your life and your practice, visit oliviavizachero.com. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review if you found this episode helpful. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.